Hello everyone, Sente here, and I'm really excited about this lecture because I've been meaning to do a beginner's transition to 19 by 19 for a very long time now. Many beginners struggle with going to this huge, expansive 19 by 19 board, and it seems that just after getting the hang of the shapes and the flow of the game on a 9 by 9, jumping into this seems like going from a puddle to an ocean. The goal of this video is to demystify that transition and to try to show you what is the same, what is different, and how you can best leverage your skill at 9 by 9 to make this move to 19 by 19 as seamless as possible to give yourself a better understanding of the game. Super excited for this, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into it. Okay, so 9 by 9 and 19 by 19. How do we move from the small board to the big board? Well, what best helps is to understand what isn't changing, right? That's the best way. What is not changing? What is not changing is your fighting skills. So your close quarters fighting, understanding the relationship between the small knight, understanding your relationship between the one space jump, understanding your relationship between the diagonal, and what those moves do is still going to come in handy. If you go somewhere completely different and you mess up your shape and your opponent cuts, well, that's still going to happen in 19 by 19. So the skills that you learn when fighting in 9 by 9 are your shape skills. Understanding what can be cut, what can't be cut, and how to make life in a small area. I'm sure if you played 9 by 9, your opponent has tried to kill you multiple times in situations where you didn't know if you'd live or not. You used your knowledge of shape to create two eyes and create life for yourself in very small situations. That's still going to be the same. In 19 by 19 Go, there are a lot of corner joseki here. There's going to be a lot of times your opponent's going to jump in, and you're going to need to figure out how best to respond in a way that keeps your stones connected. I'm going to show you guys some examples from real games where the situations are actually pretty similar to a 9 by 9 board. Now let's take this situation that I just came across in using the OGS server. We can see that black made a little bit of a dubious cut here. White can clearly Atari this stone and use that in combination with white's next move to get a ladder. So notice white is going to Atari, black's going to extend, and now white is going to capture this stone in a ladder using the reinforcement of white's other stones. There are many joseki and situations where ladders are extremely, extremely important. A perfect situation is this formation right here. White can actually invade this 3 stone apart formation by hitting the middle of the 2 stones. Black's best response is to try to stay connected no matter what, and white has a really interesting setup with this wedge here. Black is going to Atari, white is going to extend, just like black extended in this situation. Black is going to defend the cutting point, and white is going to capture the stone in a ladder. No matter what black does, white can follow it to the edge of the board. If black wants to defend the other stone, black can play here. In response, white's going to Atari, and then the ladder goes this way. This is a very common invasion in 19 by 19, and we can see that the skills you're building in 9 by 9, learning about these Ataris into ladders. Atari into ladder. These sequences and these combinations of shapes will help you in your games. Okay, let's direct your attention to the 9 by 9 board. Now, what is black's best move in this situation? Well, if you've been playing 9 by 9 a lot, we know that this is a great endgame exchange. White's forced to block, black can defend, white can defend, and then black can continue to ride the edges of the shape and get the most points for themselves that they can. If we move our attention over to the 19 by 19 side and it's white's move, we can see that the same situations will apply, just on a much bigger scale. Take a look around the board. Try to find the edges. It's the end game, groups are being settled, and territory and lines are open. There are many ways for endgame points to be created and generated on this board. And sometimes a good endgame is the difference between winning by 10 points or losing by 5. Take a minute. Try to figure out some good moves for white. See how many points you can bleed out of this endgame in a way that black has to respond to before playing another move. All right, you got your guesses? Well, here are some great candidates for endgame. This move right here. Black needs to defend this. When white covers, white is threatening a double Atari on the stone, which means black has no choice but to defend here. Just like we saw on the 9 by 9 board. White has even more tricks up their sleeve. How about this move? That's also an edge riding. Whoops. An edge riding endgame move that black needs to respond to. Here's an Atari. Did you guys see that Atari? White can play here, and black needs to respond, and white gets an extra point. There's many ways in the endgame for white to increase the point value, as well as black. If white makes a slack move, black has this move as well. That can keep and take a white stone, and give really good endgame potential for later on in the game. So we can see that the endgame skills you learn in 9 by 9 do translate over to 19 by 19. So we have shapes, we have endgame, and we have fighting. All these things will help you, but the key and the devil is in the details, and now we're going to move on to the differences. One issue with 9 by 9 is how easy it is for corner groups to make life. Take this example. Black made a wall facing this side of the board, and white made a wall facing the right side. Because white is pretty close to the edge, they're not going to have many problems making life here. White can also play this 3-3 star point. It's incredibly difficult for black to do anything about it. Black can try their best, but we can see that white is almost completely alive as it stands and can make a living group in the corner, even though white played on the side of black's influence. Black can try to counterattack by honeying here, but it's a little bit difficult. White's so close to the edge that they can create a good number of points anyway. But do you notice how even though white has points in this variation, black is ahead? Seriously, look at this. Let's estimate the score. Black is winning by 15.5 points in this game. And that's really telling, because even though white never died, black surrounded white's groups. And by surrounding white's groups, black was able to get more power over a bigger part of the board. This principle of not necessarily needing to kill groups, but surrounding them for profit elsewhere is one of the biggest mental shifts you're going to need to understand when you move to a 19 by 19 board. Because influence is so important. It might not feel as important because the board is so much bigger, but believe me, being able to surround a small group, having someone invest 10 stones in 3 points of territory is an extremely strong tactic, and you will see this played all the way up to Dawn level. You see Dawn players get into these very intense running fights because they don't want to be surrounded. Surrounding your group means the group can no longer affect the rest of the game, and in 19 by 19, it seems less important, but it's so much more important. A great way to understand this is through the simple Joseki of the 3-3 invasion. Now, I know that the AI really loves the 3-3 invasion. It really values points over influence, but influence can be very, very powerful when playing against humans, who might not have as good life-making skills as the AI counterparts. If we can see Black's wall, and have Black's wall being used effectively, we can see that while white is scrambling to try to make a base, and to try to make some sort of living group for itself, black is pushing down and keeping white low. In keeping white low, black is minimizing white's points. And by surrounding white's group, now, if white makes a slack move, black will be able to make more points on the other side of the board. Now, this is a very highly theorized sequence. I don't think this would happen this way in the actual game. But this is just sort of understanding how important it is to not be surrounded and how important center influence is. We can see that if white departs and maybe another exchange is had, black's expansion here is trying to curb white's influence while getting points for themselves. So, in 19 by 19, you see a lot of running groups. You see one space jumps. You see shoulder hits to keep groups low. And this is all in an effort to keep groups surrounded. So don't be afraid to make a giant wall. In 9 by 9 Go, this might mean that you don't have enough points to win. But in 19 by 19 Go, this wall will come in very handy to both attack groups, to create points, and to affect more of the board than you normally would. Okay, now the second difference for 9 by 9 versus 19 by 19 is in how you establish your groups. In 9 by 9, a lot of the time, you see basically one, maybe two groups from each player. Here we can see one black group and one white group. Black is all connected up, and white has two groups here to start with. What you'll see in a lot of amateur, very beginner 19 by 19 games is you'll see giant groups stretching and coiling with each other in a way sort of like this. Let's say you have two things here. Maybe black will do this. White won't try to go where black is. White will go here. Maybe black will continue on this side of the board. White will make a bigger group here. Maybe black will extend. Maybe white will extend. Black can go in here. Maybe white tries to invade, then gets into a little bit of trouble. But there's a tendency in lower level games to keep your stones very close together. In 19 by 19 Go, just like in chess, it's encouraged to develop your board state diversely. What that means is that you want to try to establish influence or stones across a large part of the board. You don't want to concentrate all your stones in one area. Let's take this as an example. Let's say black was trying to concentrate all their stones in one area. And black plays here. Black plays here. And let's say black does this. Black keeps going. Extending again. Extending again. And every time white is taking sort of large points that don't show you an established group yet, but radiate potential across the board. White is in a much better position here. Even though black has very solid points, black's growth potential is fairly low. White will be able to establish commanding positions across the center of the board, given the chance. Furthermore, if black were to try to invade or do something, we'd find that black's group is going to be very unsettled. Black is going to be running all around the board, trying to make the group safe, trying to give it eyes, trying to give it some fighting chance for life. And while black's group is running, white is going to be solidifying and picking up those points at every single turn. Black's group might eventually live and get connected to their teammates, but white will have gotten very solid points and a lot of center influence from that attack. So the next difference you want to try to remember is that unlike 9 by 9, you want to diversify the number of groups that you have in 19 by 19. That's why when you see an advanced game, you'll see them play in a bunch of different places. Maybe you'll see black approach white's corner. Maybe start building a moyo, and then you might see white play in here to try to disrupt black's moyo before black has a chance to make it incredibly strong. We see struggle between black and white groups playing with each other, trying to establish security and safety, and this, in this close range fighting, is where your basics and your 9x9 skills are going to come in handy. To try to make living groups when you do get in a pinch, but you want to trust your ability to make those living groups, to make those 2 eyes, to run out if you're feeling too pressured. And these strategic decisions are what make 19x19 so complex. It's like taking a game of Super Smash Brothers and turning it into Risk, where you have armies moving across the landscape. So we've talked about the importance of diversifying your stones, putting them in different places, and using the fighting skills you've learned in 9x9 to establish secure and safe groups. Now, I just want to leave you with one more advanced technique and a way to operate in 19x19 that will really serve you in your games. And that is the concept versus contact fighting and distance fighting. In 9x9, you don't have a lot of space to work with. Oftentimes, you're going to be contact fighting from the very beginning. Your opponent's going to hit your stones, it's going to make you respond, you're going to be very close to each other. But in 19x19, that is not the case. And I want to show you guys a general principle on how to attack that is different in 19x19, because there's 2 ways to attack or to interact with your opponent's stones. You can interact from a distance, playing maybe 1, 2, 3 spaces away, lightly pressuring the stones, not attacking them, but threatening to surround them. A distance fighting while keeping connected to your other stones, or a contact way of fighting, where you hit your opponent's stones and force them to either hane, making panukis, cutting, and starting into a very close quarters sort of fight that spills out into the entire board. I want to give you just a few general principles, and that if you are in enemy territory, like white is right now, the best way to get a living group is to use contact fighting. That means that you want to try to attach to your opponent's stones. That will force them to hane to respond, but in doing so, that creates cutting points. Those cutting points will help you establish eyes. We can see that by white attaching here, white can make almost a panuki. If black tries to defend here, white gets this Atari, and then this Atari. Black has to extend, white can extend, and black needs to capture this white stone, otherwise they'll be captured. But because of that, white was able to make a strong living group in the corner. Now, if you were black, let's say white didn't defend this wheat group, and how would black respond? Well, when you're attacking a group, the best thing to do is to use distance fighting. You want to try to corral them, like a wolf corrals sheep, or like the farmers do when they're trying to herd sheep into a pen. You don't want to outright hit them for the same reason that white wants to hit black stones. Because if you hit the stones, you're going to create complications, you're going to create cutting points, and you're going to create opportunities for white to make ladders and establish points and eyes for themselves. So if you're attacking here, you want to try to surround white from a distance. White's going to try to attack and create complications, but you're going to try to stay solid and defend your shape. You're going to continue to surround, trying to leave as few cutting points open as possible. Try to attack white's underbelly. White will need to try to make eyes within this shape, but now you've done 2 things. You've kept white small, you might not have killed it, but you've created 2 walls here and here to influence the rest of the board. And that's why corralling moves are very, very, very strong when you're trying to attack. Attacking from a distance is key in 19x19 because not only does it pressure your opponent's groups, but it gives you strength on the outside of your attack to fight for other areas in the game. We can see that white invested 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stones in maybe 4, 5, 6 points of territory, while black maybe has 3 stones surrounding 12 points of territory that white cannot take away. That is how you use your stones efficiently in 19x19 Go. So I hope that these techniques can help you get a stronger footing in 19x19. And just to review, tip number 1 is that making walls is a great way to control other parts of the board. You can use them for attacking or for creating a large amount of territory. Point number 2 is that oftentimes you're going to have many different groups in the beginning of the game. You'll have stones very spread apart, but they're all going to converge into separate groups, and one group by your fighting and your ability to make good shape for yourself. Whereas in 9x9, you often saw at most maybe 2 groups on the same board. It's important to understand that even though you have multiple stones peppered across the whole board, your goal should still be to make as few groups as you can, and that's done by trying to surround your opponent and turn your scattered stones into one large cohesive unit. And then the last concept is that if you're fighting and you're the weaker stone, you want to try to use contact moves to strengthen both you and your opponent to try to get eyes. If you are the attacker, you want to try to have distance fighting. Attack from a couple lines away, corral your opponent into a sad small group that's not making a lot of points, and use that strength to affect other parts of the board. I hope that these tips can help you sort of transition and move to a 19x19 space. And please comment on the video with any other questions you have, different situations, and maybe ideas for future videos. Again, I hope this helped you. I'm so glad to have made this. Sign up for my Patreon if you want to sort of join the community of Go players and support the channel at the same time. And follow my Twitch. All these links are in the description below for your leisure. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the grid.